The day started out as a hectic one when the alarm clock failed to wake me and my wife. It seems there was a power outage during the night and we had to rush to make it to work on time. Well, she had to rush as I didn't have to be at work until 9 a.m., and it was only a 15-minute drive for me. My wife likes to check her email in the morning before she leaves for work, but was in such a hurry she forgot to shut down her computer. So when I was about to turn it off, I saw an email that she had gotten a few days ago that the subject line read aloha to a great time. Needless to say, I opened it and was immediately crushed to find out my wife was planning to fly off to Hawaii with another guy while I would be on a 2-week business trip. This was a kick to my gut and a knee to my balls. Now, let me give you some background. My wife, Kathy, and I met through some mutual friends over 12 years ago who thought we'd be a good match. As it turned out, we were both into fitness and a healthy lifestyle. She was a yoga instructor and personal trainer, while I worked in the marketing business for a mid-sized company with dreams of becoming bigger. I love the outdoors, so any chance I get, you'll find me hiking, mountain biking, running, or any number of other things involving the outdoors. We shared many other interests and we looked good together. Kathy stands 5'6" with long, flowing brown hair, brown eyes, and of course a killer body. I'm 6'3" with blonde hair, blue eyes, and an athletic build. Was it love at first sight? No, but we grew to be good friends and later the romance began slowly. It took a couple of years, but we did marry and I thought we were happy for the last date. I knew I was, but after reading this email, I knew our marriage was in serious trouble. It seems this guy, Gary, and she had been planning this romantic getaway for some time now. She knew of my upcoming business trip as it was a huge opportunity for me and the company. I was going to be away for 2 weeks with a few associates to try and land several big accounts. If I could make this happen, it would mean a promotion and nice bump up in pay. But now, as I stared at this email that was the last thing on my mind, I started to go through her other emails and see what I could find out about this Gary. It seems she had saved all her emails from him in a folder called Trips. How convenient for me. You see, Kathy isn't computer savvy, but I use computers on a daily basis, so I knew my way around. It became very clear she had been seeing this a whole for the last 6 months. But why? I couldn't think of any obvious sign that she was unhappy. Our sex life was great, and we enjoyed each other's company. What pushed her into the arms and bed of another man? My head was spinning, and I needed to get to work. But before I left, I copied all the saved emails to a thumb drive so I could read them later and try to gather more information on Gary and maybe even get some insight as to why she was doing this. Finally shutting off her computer, I rushed off to work. My thoughts were all about her and Gary. As I was getting over the shock of this discovery, my anger started to build, and I wanted revenge on an epic scale. Now, I am not a violent man, nor do I believe in revenge, but this was different. This infidelity on her part was not something I could forgive. I began to wonder where and when this all started, but quickly decided I didn't need to know. What I did want to know was more about Gary and what I could do to ruin his life. I didn't want him dead or seriously injured, although those thoughts did appeal to me. No, I wanted them both to suffer a very public humiliation. But what and how still needed to be worked out. I had 6 weeks to figure something out, so when I got to work, I shut the door to my office and brainstormed. What I needed was more information, not only on Gary, but the details of their trip as well. Then an idea started to form as to how I could ruin their trip before they even left the ground and expose their affair in such a way she would not be able to deny it. It was a risky plan, but it would make her pay in the end. As the day went on, I did some actual work, but also kept thinking about my plan. When it was time to head home, I stayed in my office for over an hour listing out what I needed and how to go about getting those items. I also made a list of the dangers involved in what I was planning. If this backfired or it was discovered I had a hand in any of this, it could mean jail time for me, but I felt that risk was worth it. Now, to gather more information on Gary, I needed access to Kathy's email and computer, so I went online to see if I could download software to get her passwords to her computer and email account, but then stopped. If this was going to work, I couldn't leave a paper trail or electronic one either. You see, if there were to be any type of investigation, I didn't want anyone to find out I was involved. So with that in mind, I had to figure out how to get what I needed in such a way that it could not be traced back to me. Over the next few days, I purchased a few throwaway cell phones from different stores 30 miles or more outside of town, all with cash, along with a small laptop that I could use at places that offered free Wi-Fi so my activities couldn't be linked to work or home. I also bought a few wireless video cameras and some bugs to place around the house in the hope that she brings this a hole into our bed for some extramarital fun. That thought made my blood run cold, but they might just talk about their upcoming trip and provide me with the much-needed information that I needed to make my plan work. As time passed, I tried to act as normal as possible around my wife so she would not suspect me of being onto her affair. That was hard, but over the next few weeks, it became so natural to look at her and smile a loving smile while I thought of her screwing that other guy. I think I missed my calling and should have been an actor. During that time, I reached out to some old friends using one of the phones I bought so there could be no possible link made to me or the person I was calling. My first call was to a college friend whom I had not spoken to since graduating over 14 years ago. Steve was a party animal back in the day and had been the go-to guy if you were in need of something to liven up the evening. "Steve, it's Hank. How have you been, man?" At first, Steve didn't remember, but after some reminders of those parties in college, it finally clicks. "Hey, Hank. Yeah, now I remember. Boy, those were the days, my friend. What have you been up to?" I gave him a very brief rundown of my life after college. He in turn told me things hadn't turned out as he had hoped, but was doing okay. "So what do I owe the pleasure of your call?" It wasn't just to reminisce about the good old days. I had to be careful on how to approach the subject, so I wanted to meet him in person. "Look, I need some help and was hoping you might be able to provide it. I was thinking we could meet for lunch and talk about it. What do you say?" He hesitated for a moment. "Yeah, sure, anything for an old college buddy." We made plans to meet at a place far from my workplace, but close to him in a few days. I was really hoping he could help me as time was starting to run down, and I didn't know of anyone else who I could ask. I had also placed the cameras and bugs in the bedroom and living room, thinking those were the two most likely places they would talk and do other things. So it had been the first week they were in place, and when I checked it showed me nothing. I thought that maybe she was going to his place as it might be too risky to come back here for their sex fest. But the following week was a different story. It seemed she brought Gary back to our place late one morning, and they screwed in every position imaginable for just over 2 hours. It made me sick to watch it, but I had to just to see if they talked about their trip or gave up any more useful information, but nothing. The following week I checked the cameras again and found that they had returned, but not for sex, as they just talked about their upcoming trip, which gave me the information I was looking for, their flight number and departure time. As I listened, I could hear the excitement in my wife's voice as they talked about what they had planned. I was more than beyond furious, and I even knew about killing the two of them, but dismissed that thought. I wanted them both to live a long and miserable existence. This revenge was going to last a lifetime and follow them to their graves. I had a dream that when my soon-to-be ex-wife was laying on her deathbed old and gray, I would walk in and smile, then lean over and tell her how I had ruined her trip to Hawaii. I would stand up, smile down at her as she looked at me in shock, and then turn around and leave. I was now more determined than ever to make this work, but there was still one thing that I needed to do, and that was going to be another risk I'd have to take. I finally found out more about Gary. He and my wife work at the same health club as a personal trainer as well. It seems he has a bad habit of betting on other men's wives. Well, that's about to come to a very ugly end. He lives not far from the club and was in a small condo complex, so I decided to do a little surveillance and took a day off from work, telling my boss I needed to take care of a few personal things before our business trip. I had purchased a digital camera with a powerful zoom and watched his place for a few hours. It wasn't anything special, just a small 2-bedroom complex, and it looked as if his neighbors were gone during the day for work, and there were no security cameras. That was good because what I had planned for him needed to be done covertly. At the meeting with Steve, I was nervous about what I needed to ask him. This was the biggest risk of my whole plan, but if I could get what I needed, then it would be so worth it. I saw Steve come into the restaurant and waved him over to the table I was sitting at. It was far at the back, and the place was pretty quiet with only a dozen or so customers there having a late lunch. He walked up and greeted me, "Long time no see, bro. So what do I owe the pleasure of this meeting?" Time had not been kind to Steve. He looked awful, as if he could have been an extra on the show Walking Dead. I wanted to make this quick. If he couldn't help me, then I would need to look somewhere else for what I needed to buy. We started to talk about college and some of the epic parties Steve threw. The man was a party animal back then, but it has since caught up with him. He looked to be at least 15 years older than his real age. I needed to move things along, so I just came out and asked him point blank. Steve, the reason I asked you here was to see if you or someone you know might help get me some party favors for a little private party I'll be throwing. I handed him a list. Can you help me out? I'll gladly pay you for your time. Steve read the list, first with a look of shock, but then a smile came across his face. Sure, man, no problem. Sounds like it's gonna be an awesome party, dude. Think you could invite an old college buddy along? I smiled in relief. Sure, no problem. Just get me what I asked for, and I'll let you know where and when the party will be. Okay, cool, but I'm gonna need some cash up front to get these items for you. I was prepared and handed him an envelope with several $1,000s in it. Will this do? Man, you are planning a major blowout, aren't you? This is more than enough. When do you need this stuff? I told him to meet me next week with the items and that if there was a problem or a delay to call me. I then gave him the number to my new cell phone and we left the restaurant soon after. It was now 2 weeks before my trip and my wife and her lover were planning on flying out the following day after I left on my trip, so timing was crucial. I had met with Steve and he was able to get me everything I had asked for. Now all I had to do was to place these items so they wouldn't be found until the time was right. 3 days before my trip, I went home early and checked my wife's suitcase. It was packed and ready to go for her trip, the cheating witch. So I very carefully went into it and placed a few little surprises as a going-away gift. I made sure to hide them, so if she were to unpack and then repack, she would never find them. She wasn't the one I wanted to find anyway. Next came another risky venture, which involved breaking into Gary's place. I knew his work schedule, so that wasn't an issue. What was the issue was that I had never done anything like this before. I was able to purchase a lockpick set and a book on how to pick a lock. The things you can buy on the internet. I had practiced on several locks at home and at work. I had gotten pretty good at it, so I had great hopes this part of the plan would work. It was early afternoon, so I told my boss I needed to take a long lunch. I surprised myself as I was able to pick the lock in just over a minute and was inside his home. Speed was the key. I wanted to do what I came to do as quickly as possible and leave without a trace. I wore latex gloves and went straight to his bedroom where I found his packed bag ready for a trip. As I had done with my wife's suitcase, I went through his and placed a few travel gifts that would certainly make this a memorable trip. Once finished, I then moved to the kitchen and found a can of coffee. I then pulled out a mixing bowl from one of his cupboards and emptied the coffee from the can into it. I then placed a few packets in the bottom of the can and filled it back up with the coffee and placed it back where I found it. Making sure all was back where it belonged, I left Gary's place and headed home. I had just one more thing to do. It was a couple of days before my trip, and I reached out to a friend of mine who I knew had a cousin that worked at the airport with the AITA. I also had all the information on the flight my wife and Gary were to take. It was now just a matter to get the information into the right hands, but not to let anyone know where it came from. So I reached out to my friend, but had to be somewhat cryptic about how I came across this information. Jack, I need to ask a favor, but you have to keep this information about who gave it to you a secret. I gave him details of the flight and Gary's name, but not my wife's. Jack said he would tell his cousin and that he would handle it from there. I also removed all the cameras and bugs and disposed of them in a way so no one could find them. I also hid a few surprises in Kathy's car just to add to her woes. Now it was the day before my trip, and I thought I'd have a little fun at my wife's expense. As I came home from work, I walked in the house and sat down acting upset. My wife looked at me. What's wrong? Something happened at work? Oh, something happened. All right, the clients we were supposed to meet just canceled the meetings. So now I won't be going on that trip and the company won't get the opportunity to grow. I said with mock anger. I saw the shock and fear on her face. It was then I knew she was thinking of a way to get me to go on that trip so she and Gary could have their fun in Hawaii. Can't they send you anyway and try to work things out with those clients? I mean, you and your team have spent a lot of time and energy on this project. It seems such a shame to waste all of that hard work. This pissed me off to no end about how she could talk about shame. She had no shame and she and Gary were going to pay. I looked at her and laughed, just pulling your leg, honey. The trip is still on, don't worry. There was a sign of great relief on her face, and then she smiled. You had me going there for a second? So you're all packed? Yeah, I just need to add a few items to my carry-on, and I'll be ready to go. Hope you won't miss me too much while I'm gone. Do you have anything planned? Maybe a girls' night out or something? No, nothing. I'll be sitting here just waiting for my loving husband to return. God, I almost laughed at that, but I was too angry. The next day, my wife drove me to the airport and dropped me off. I gave her a long, passionate kiss while my hands rubbed that sweet, tight bum of hers. It would be the last kiss I would ever give her, so I wanted it to be a memorable one. I met up with the rest of the group and we boarded the flight. It was uneventful, and once when we landed and had checked in at the hotel, I called the house, but I used the phone from the hotel room. There was no answer, so I left a message. Honey, I did a really stupid thing. I left my phone in the cab and won't be able to call you until I get it returned or replaced. So if you need to call me, leave a message at the front desk, and I'll be sure to call you later in the evening. I didn't forget my phone. I just wanted to have a valid excuse for not taking your calls. So the next day came and I made sure my phone was off and that no one could reach me while I was in meetings all day with clients. When I got back to the room, I checked but hadn't received any messages, so I turned on my phone and didn't find any messages from my wife or anyone else. Well, maybe they did get through security at the airport. The next day, the meetings went even better than the first ones, and we were back at the hotel early. There were several messages waiting for me on the phone in my hotel room. One was from my wife, another was from her father, and the third was from a D agent, which brought a smile to my face. I then checked my cell phone and saw several messages waiting for me. I played the messages from the hotel phone. The first was from my wife, and she was crying. Baby, it's me. I'm in big trouble and I really need you. Please come home now. Please. After that, all I heard was crying. The next message was from my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law. Hank, your wife has been trying to get in touch with you. She's been arrested and needs you home now. Please call me when you can. The last message was from a D agent. Sir, this is Agent DeFranco, and I would like to speak with you about your wife and her arrest on drug charges. He went on about where to reach him and a few other details. I was so happy I couldn't stop smiling, but had to put on a serious face for my coworkers. This had worked out perfectly so far, but I still needed to act surprised and shocked so no one would suspect I had anything to do with this. So I contacted my boss the following morning and told him I had a serious problem at home, but didn't give out any details. He said that since the meetings were going so well, I could leave to take care of this emergency, but he wanted me back as soon as possible to ensure that we close the deals with these clients. I caught the first plane back home, and as soon as I was on the ground, I pulled out my lost cell phone and called my father-in-law. What in hell is going on? I got your message, but don't believe it. Kathy was arrested on drug charges. She doesn't do drugs. Where did this happen? At the health club. I knew exactly where it took place. No, she was traveling with a friend to Hawaii and was stopped at security where they found some illegal drugs on her and her friend. Her father said in a low voice, as if embarrassed, "Wait a minute, just wait. She told me she was going to be home and that she didn't have any plans. Who is this friend she was going to Hawaii with? I bet one of her girlfriends told her to go and got her into all this mess." Her father hesitated a moment. I know it was with someone else. The important thing to remember here, Hank, is that she is in trouble and needs our help. She loves you, and I know you love her so. I cut him off. What aren't you telling, Dad? Who is she traveling with? I yelled into the phone. I was enjoying this a little too much. There was silence, then he cleared his throat. She was traveling with a man. Gary somebody. He has been arrested. Again, I cut him off. So you're telling my wife your daughter was flying off to Hawaii with another man while I was out busting my bum to earn a living, and she got busted for drug possession. Is that what you're telling me? Yes, I'm afraid it is what I'm telling you. I took a long pause. Okay, I need to talk to her lawyer, then this D agent, and then I'm going to talk to her. After that, we'll go from there, but she better have one hell of an explanation as to why she was about to go to Hawaii with another man and taking drugs with her as well. I hung up on him before he could respond. When I got home, I saw there were over 20 messages waiting, so I began to play them back. The first, as expected, was from me about losing my cell phone. The next few were from Kathy, hoping I would check her messages while I was on my business trip. Several were from her father, and the rest from her lawyer asking me to get in touch as soon as possible. I called the lawyer, and since he wasn't in the office at that time, I made an appointment for the following morning. Next, I called the D. Agent DeFranco and agreed to meet him at his office downtown later that afternoon. I quickly got cleaned up and headed off, all the while trying to think if I had covered my tracks so none of this could come back on me. Soon I found myself in what I can only assume was an interrogation room. Agent DeFranco walked in carrying a folder. "Glad you were able to stop by and see me. I have some questions about your wife that I was hoping you could answer." He said this while reading something from the folder. "Look, my wife isn't into drugs. As long as I've known her, she has never taken anything illegal. Hell, she doesn't even drink that much. This must be all a big misunderstanding or mistake. She's a yoga instructor, for God's sake. Why would she be doing drugs?" I was putting on a little act, but Agent DeFranco never looked up. People do all sorts of stupid things for all sorts of stupid reasons. "Now, did you know your wife was going to Hawaii with this guy, Gary? She told us he was just a friend, but Gary said they were going to have a romantic holiday." "So do you know Gary? Did you know your wife was having an affair? Did you know anything about the drugs?" Now he was looking at me, hard. I took a deep breath to calm myself. I didn't know any of it until I talked with my father-in-law this morning. But I still can't believe it. She must have been coerced into doing this. She is just a good person to be involved in anything like this. I didn't want to overplay this. I'm sure this guy could spot someone lying in a heartbeat, so I had to be very careful. He sighed. "No, I guess you didn't know." "Well, I hate to break it to you, chum, but your wife was cheating on you with a drug dealer, no less. Now we've already searched his place and found even more drugs, and soon we'll be searching your home as well. Now you could cooperate and let us into your house, or it wouldn't take long to get a search warrant. Either way, we'll be there soon to do the search." I knew her lawyer would have said not to, but this was self-preservation, and it would look good that I was not trying to hide anything. So I agreed and soon found myself back at the house with dozens of D and FBI agents and a couple of their dogs looking through my house. They did take a few things, some pill containers she kept in the medicine cabinet. The next day, while I met with Kathy's lawyer, I told him of my meeting with DeFranco and of the search. He was not happy. "If you have any more contact with any law enforcement official, I want to be there before you answer any questions. Do you understand?" I nodded. I was pissed. "Now let me make something clear to you. I want to know everything that has happened that led to my wife being arrested. So far, all I know is that she was about to board a flight to Hawaii with this guy, Gary, and if you or she wants my help, somebody better tell me how this came to be. Do I make myself clear? You know I can't discuss your wife's case with you." At that point, I walked out. Next, I went to the jail where she was being held and asked to see her. I met her in a room with several other inmates who were meeting either with family or lawyers at round metal tables with stools around them bolted to the floor. I saw her being led and wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, no makeup, and her hair was pulled back into a tight but messy ponytail. She looked like shit, as if she hadn't slept in the last few days. "Oh, baby, I'm so glad you're here," she cried. I was about to give her a hug when a guard came over and told us we could have no physical contact. This made her cry even more. "It's okay, baby, we'll get this whole mess sorted out. What I need now is to hear your side of the story. How did you end up flying off to Hawaii with this guy?" I said this with no emotion whatsoever. She started to cry even more. "Hank, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So it is true. You were having an affair with this guy, Gary, this drug dealer? How could you? Weren't you happy with me? Don't you love me? I don't understand this. I mean, you and him. Then there are the drugs. What were you thinking?" I waited, but I knew she didn't have an answer. "Please, please believe me when I say I've always loved you. This was just a one-time thing. It didn't mean anything to me. Can you please find it in your heart to forgive me?" She was pleading with me now. I looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I might have found it in my heart to forgive you, but you shattered it into a million pieces, and therefore I have no forgiveness for you. When I leave here, I'll be talking to a divorce lawyer, and all the locks will have been changed on the house. I'll have all your clothes and other belongings sent to your parents' place because I want all traces of you removed from MY house. As of now, you are no longer part of my life. I want nothing more to do with you. Oh, and tell that lawyer of yours that he better not use me as a character witness because I'll have nothing good to say about you. Goodbye, Kathy. I hope things work out for you." She was crying her eyes out and begging me not to go because she needed me. I never turned around but just went straight home and started to pack up her shit. I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed the following day. Then I called a security company and arranged to have them come by next week and install their top-of-the-line system for me. Within a few days, I had most of her stuff packed and ready to be sent to her parents' house. I'd also received and ignored several calls from Kathy wanting to talk. As far as I was concerned, she could go to hell. Finally, I was able to return to work, and we were able to sign those big clients we had been pursuing. Soon, I had my promotion and the pay raise that came with it. I was able to divorce Kathy with little trouble, as it was a straight-up 50-50 split with no alimony and with her footing the bill for her legal fees from her drug arrest. She kept trying to get in touch with me, but I wanted to put some distance between us. Now she never went to trial as the evidence was so overwhelming that her lawyer said she couldn't win. It was in her best interest to take a plea deal and get a shorter sentence. She was not happy, to say the least. Gary, on the other, had fought tooth and nail to try and prove his innocence. Dumb bastard was sent up for 15 years, whereas Kathy only got 5 years. It was the day of Kathy's sentencing, and she had asked to see me one last time before she started serving her sentence. I agreed, and we met at her lawyer's office an hour before she was due in court. She looked at me, and I could see she had been crying. "Hank, I just wanted you to know that Gary didn't mean a thing to me. It was you I loved and always will love. I'm so sorry I hurt you like this. It was never meant to be this way. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday." She was on the verge of tears again. "Kathy, I want to know one thing. Why? Were you bored? Did I disappoint you in bed? Was it the thrill of doing something wrong and getting away with it? What? What made you do this and destroy our marriage?" I said sadly. She looked at me. "I don't really know why. I guess it was the excitement of doing something wrong, but I always loved you. Apparently you didn't love me enough, or you would have never done this in the first place. Kathy, I hope this will be the last time that I ever have to deal with you, but I never want to see or hear from you again. I also want you to spend your time in prison thinking just how much you've lost, all because you wanted a little excitement in your life. I'm guessing you're going to have some exciting times behind bars once those ladies see your tight little bum." She started to cry again, but this time out of fear. Over the next few years, the company grew, and I worked my way up to a VP position. The business expanded, and we now had an office in New York, and I was chosen to head it up. This meant selling my house, moving to Manhattan, and getting an apartment. Early on, I had received a few letters from Kathy, but sent them back unopened. That was a part of my life I wanted to put behind me and move on. It has been 7 years now, and my life in New York was good. I was still single and dating a different woman every few months. I had no desire to get married and put myself at risk of being betrayed again. Once was enough. I was sitting in my office when a call from the lobby came in, and my administrative assistant Amy came in. "There is a woman downstairs wanting to speak to you. She says her name is Kathy." I paused for a moment, have her shown up, but have 2 security guards standing by. "Also, I have something I want you to do for me." I wrote something down and handed it to Amy. "Call me a few minutes after you show her in." She looked at what I had written and smiled at it. A few minutes later, Kathy was in my office, but she looked at least 10 years older and had put on some weight, but not in a good way. Her once beautiful long brown hair was now showing some gray and was frayed. I could see the bags under her eyes, which were sad looking. The clothes she wore were stylish, but conservative and a bit dated. I looked at her but felt nothing, not love, not hate, not even pity. I was just empty of emotion. "So, Kathy, what do you want? Hank, I was hoping to talk to you." I felt the need to set the record straight as to what happened to me. You see, I had no idea about the drugs, and I still don't know how they got in my bags. Gary must have snuck them in when I wasn't looking. I'm not a drug user and never have been. Please believe me. She was pleading. "Kathy, you threw away our marriage for a fling and made our whole marriage a lie. Why should I believe you now? Why is it so important that you felt the need to track me down and tell me another lie? You don't understand. I love you. I still love you. I want you back. I want us to be together again. I want us to." Just then the phone on my desk rang and I put it on speaker. "Yes, Amy." "What is it?" "Stacy called to confirm that you should get 4 tickets for the opening, as her parents are coming into town and they want to meet you." Let her know that I'll buy 4 tickets. Oh, and find out where her parents are staying. I'd like to send her mother a dozen roses. I ended the call and turned back to Kathy. You were saying Kathy was on the verge of tears. Who is Stacy? Oh, just some woman I've been dating for a while, but you're not here to discuss my love life. You were telling me you still love me. I'm flattered, but you should know I do not love you anymore. That ended the day your father told me you were arrested and that you were about to fly off to Hawaii with Gary. As soon as your infidelity was exposed, I was done with you. Now please leave and I never want to see you again. Do you understand me? I looked hard at her, but I didn't have anything to do with those drugs they found. I was set up. Gary must have slammed my hand down on my desk. Kathy, enough with your lies. You were screwing around on me. You lied to me then, and you're lying to me now. Just stop it. I don't believe you, and I never will. I think it's time you left, and please don't come back. I've instructed security that if you ever show up here again to have you arrested. Do I make myself clear? She was silently crying but nodded her head. I led her to the door and had the 2 security guards escort her out of the building. Amy came in after she left. What was that all about? Oh, that was just me saying aloha to a great time.